I'm John Dennis. I'm running against Nancy Pelosi.
We have the most beautiful state and one of the most beautiful places in the world, and people are leaving.
I'm gonna catch you when all the cameras aren't around, and I'm gonna you up. Oh, try it.
He's the chairman of the San Francisco GOP, and he's running against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Step back, everyone.
Well. Welcome to the John Dennis Report. Thanks for joining us today. It's April, Jesus, what am I talking about? It's May 4th, 2021. And we are here in San Francisco reporting live and doing the John Dennis Report for you, following what's happening in the world and hopefully trying to make some sense of it. It is a strange time that we're in, you know? I feel like, listen, I've put this out there before. This, I suppose, runs the risk of me getting dinged for something or other by some social media group or other. But I have to tell you, I find the results of the election in November of last year very disconcerting, very unbelievable. Now, having said that, I've had discussions with people who feel like me, but other people, Republicans, and not even never Trumper Republicans, who feel like the results were what they were. It just strikes me as weird that little tidbits, like, for example, that Trump had over 50% approval rating, that he did better in urban races much better than he did in 2016, and for example, in San Francisco, he did 50% better. Now, that wasn't enough for him to carry San Francisco or even California, for that matter. But it was interesting that it was consistent across the country, except in 5 swing states. And I don't know. It just doesn't. I mean, there are lots of little data points that, to me, just make me feel like something funky happened. Maybe someday we'll find out. But having said all that, we are where we are, and it makes me. And I think the net result of it, and I think this is what spurred on January 6th, the dumbest move of all time. Those people who went into the Capitol, there was nothing good that was going to come from it. I don't know what those people were thinking, but I understand a part of their motivation in that they feel like, wow, if we can't rely on our elections to deliver our voice to our representatives, then this is our only resort. Well, it's not their only resort. It's a resort. There are far worse resorts that could have happened. If it was a real insurrection, then perhaps, there would be, there would have been a lot worse outcomes than what actually did happen. But I understand where they were coming from. That they were, concerned that they're not going to have any voice in the matter. And then along comes, so I've been watching, some of these elections that are coming up and polling and that sort of thing. And it leads me to what we're going to talk about a little bit later. So stay with me, because we're going to come back and talk about some things that are coming up which look bad for the Democrats. And I have some thoughts about that. But before we start that, let's get into what is ostensibly California-only news, but truthfully, the whole country's got to be watching this, because it's a fascinating topic, and that is the recall in California of Nancy Pelosi's nephew, who is also known as Gavin Newsom, nephew through marriage. They've known each other for a long time. And go to the very end there, the run by Caitlyn Jenner. And for those of you who were following this, there were 2 primary, essential, de facto leaders of the Republican challenge to Gavin Newsom. I've spoken to those two guys. In fact, I've spoken to another one. There's a third guy who was a congressman, a guy by the name of Doug Osei. And I like Doug, nice guy and everything. I don't think he has much of a chance. He tells me he can raise money, but he did this once before and dropped out. And I don't see a big appetite for Doug Osei being in the race. There will be, by the way, 100+ candidates who will file to run. A friend of mine had over on Saturday night. He was texting me this, and he brought it up again. He's not sure he's going to do it, but he did say that hold on a second. Let me jump in here. I want to make sure I'm able to see your comments. He told me that he's thinking about putting his name on the ballot because for $3,000 and like 40 signatures or something like that, you can actually, see your name on the ballot. And I think there are going to be a lot of people like that. When we had this when we had this run, this thing happened, this recall of Gray Davis happened back in the early 2000s when Schwarzenegger was elected. There were like 130 people on the ballot. I see no reason why there won't be that many this time around. And, there'll be some people of varying degrees of notoriety, fame, who will be on the ballot. The two serious candidates were from the Republican side, and it is most like a Republican is going to win because the Democrats don't want to somehow support the recall by fielding candidates of their own. They want to fight so that the recall actually loses. So they probably aren't going to field. There's some talk about Villaraigosa from Los Angeles, former mayor, running, but they probably are not going to field a serious candidate, which left John Cox, who represented the Republican Party and came in second to Newsom in 2018. Running, and then also the former mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, who I would say was the clear-cut, leader in that race prior to Caitlyn getting in. And the reason why he was the leader is because Cox ran, and people, they're kind of ambivalent about him. They didn't have a really strong feeling for him. He was the Republican nominee, and the Republican Party got behind him in 2018. But there's this sort of general feeling that he has made his pitch, and he did his duty for his country and for his state and for his party, and now it's time to move on to somebody different, and that was looking like Kevin Faulconer, and it's still may well be Kevin. Kevin is actually fairly well positioned, well suited to take on the race. However, when somebody like Caitlyn Jenner gets in the race, who's got long, deep name recognition, an ability to fundraise, all the things that I've talked about before. This is what put me on Fox News, my tweet a week ago or so. There's something there. And if Caitlyn, can come up with a serious candidacy, she's in it. She's got, she's able to garner attention in a way that these other guys cannot. Somebody like Kevin Faulconer, who was, probably the leader prior to Caitlyn getting in the race, can say, can put something out and he'll get some coverage from the media. But when Caitlyn Jenner puts out something, like, for example, her first ad, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, puts out her first ad, the amount of media coverage it's overwhelming. It's like, Kevin who? I mean, and so Caitlyn releases an ad, and it's a little long although it's an introductory ad, so it's not terrible. It's 3 minutes. I think she could have done it in a minute and 15, possibly. It's much more consumable. But she released one, and it's, gotta say, pretty good. And she comes across as serious on the issues. And that shouldn't be so surprising because Caitlyn, as Bruce, was fairly well versed in conservative politics, has been a lifelong conservative, and that doesn't change when you start wearing different clothes and living as a different gender. It doesn't change. Still the same person, still the same fundamental principles, and still the same view and vision as to as to politics and as to how we should live well together, and prosper together in the state and in the country. So here's an interesting thing. I'm going to put this up. If you can throw the screen this one here, Mario. Yeah, there you go. So we're going to put this up. So so Caitlyn releases this video, and I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try if you can maybe spread that out a little bit so folks can see it a little more clearly. But like, she puts out an ad earlier today. And look who's covering it. LA Times, ABC News, Yahoo News. Who's this? The Week, KTLA, ABC 30. I mean, huge following, huge coverage. And people are curious about what's happening here. And if people hear her, put out this sort of stuff, and she does this in a serious way, she stirs the conversation, and she sucks all of the energy towards her campaign, sucks all the energy out of the room, and guys like Kevin Faulconer are going, oh my God, what do I do? Because here's the thing. So here, a well-known Republican politico in California said to me, look, Cox is boring. Faulconer is boring. I don't think so. I mean, I think they're sort of interesting guys, but this is what this person's take on it was. Caitlyn's interesting, and it's interesting to see, this person who we knew as Bruce, who made this huge transition to being a woman, a striking figure at 6'4" or something like that, tall, and speaking in non-woke terms and conservative terms on politics, which is totally not, nobody sees that coming. Nobody sees that coming. And anyway, so that's fast. She's going to, and by the way, if she becomes, the person who takes the lead, and Newsom has to fight against her, he's got his hands full because he's a bore. I mean, it's excruciating watching Gavin Newsom speak. It is excruciating. You can't. I mean, he is the most boring guy. Apparently, I don't think he's got a lot of depth, truth be told. But, apparently he does get into this wonkish stuff, and he likes policy talk, and that's sort of interesting to him. But it's not interesting to other people. He has no way of conveying it that makes it interesting to other people. So if you put Caitlyn out there, and she's, disciplined on messaging and, understands her positions, puts them out in a way that's common sense to people, I gotta tell you, watch out. Watch what happens. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But she's already made the move. I mean, she came out the other day. From most people know that that was asked by a reporter. I think it was sort of a drive-by press conference, not a press conference, but she got within earshot of a reporter who asked the question, "What do you think about, trans women competing against females in sports?" And Caitlyn said, "No, I'm not for it. It's not fair, and it'll destroy female sports." And the reporter was like indignant, was doing a follow-up question, and Caitlyn said, "That's it. That's my answer." Boom. That's somebody who knows how to deal with the media. Not taking any crap from them. Not going to. That's my position. That's it. Report it. There you go. Do your job. No follow-up. I'll tell you, that's an interesting sign. Again, you could change. I think I still stand by my position that the first interview, assuming one's going to be granted, whoever gets it, the first interview is going to be critical, illuminating, and will tell us whether or not she's a serious candidate. If that interview goes well, in the sense that she comes, and then when I say by well, what I mean to say by well is that she comes across as knowledgeable on the issues, firm in her positions, and has a vision for California. Ladies and gentlemen, the next governor of California will be Caitlyn Jenner. It's that simple. Just this too overwhelming an advantage in the game, and especially if the California state legislature doesn't fits around and follows the rules. This is really important because the timing is critical. If we are in the middle of what's going to be presumably an awful fire season, where we have rolling blackouts to prevent fires from occurring around the state. If we have a fire season, a newish thing, by the way, didn't have it up until about 4 or 5 years ago, where the whole state is filled with smoke because they haven't been doing a good job in getting rid of the underbrush that's causing these fires. We have state filled with smoke, rolling blackouts, people not getting access to electricity, and if the election happens during the time or just after it, Newsom's done. He's toast. Pardon the pun. It's not going to happen. So, but yeah, this whole thing. Look at the coverage. And meanwhile, poor John Cox. Let's switch over to this one, Mario. John Cox is doing whatever he can to find to get some coverage. I mean, this guy's running around the state, doing press conferences with a bear. I'm talking about a dog and pony show. I mean, he's bringing animals. Talk about a gimmick campaign. Why don't we get some Hollywood sideshow actor out there running around with a porcupine or something like that, a skunk or something while he's at it? I mean, this is, it's not, I don't know. It just seems like if you're resorting to this, you're in territory that's fairly thin. I think John's a smart guy. I think if Caitlyn comes out with, strong positions, in the next couple of weeks, I think within a month, John will drop out of the campaign, because if he's got to go down this route, I think he's in rough territory. So let's keep an eye on this. I'll keep bringing you whatever I can about the Caitlyn thing. I think it's an interesting national story, not just California specific. Anybody who has 2.8 million followers on Twitter is bound to get national, if not global, coverage. So anyway, to be continued. All right, let's move on to the next topic. Speaking of Democrats in trouble, we have an article here about, let's go ahead and pull that article up about the vulnerable Dems. So we have an avalanche of Democrats saying that they are not running for re-election in the House of Representatives in 2022. And that has put Nancy Pelosi in a really difficult position. Some of them are already stepping down. We had an election recently in Texas 6 where it looks like, in Texas 6, it effectively became a top 2 race because, nobody got a majority of the votes, or, 50% plus one. So there'll be a runoff, but the runoff was going to include 2 Republicans in what I think was a Democrat seat in Texas. And, the articles out there now are talking about how Democrats are going to get crushed. They're going to get crushed because of redistricting. That happens every 10 years. So the districts are going to look a little different. And it's not looking good for the Democrats. So many of them are either have already announced they're retiring, or they announced that they're just retiring and done, or they've announced that they're running for something other than their congressional seat. By the way, here's another thing that's going to Catherine in the Bay Area brings up an interesting point. Going back to the Caitlyn thing, that Faulkner is a green energy guy, which is not going to flow. Is not going to really generate a lot of support within the Republican Party. That's going to push a lot of people away. And also, I think green energy. I think political payoffs. It just sounds like corruption to me. And if Kevin wants to intertwine himself with those kinds of people, he's going to send the wrong message. It's going to be one like, why put a corrupt Republican involved? I'm not saying Kevin's corrupt. I'm just saying that's sort of the vibe you get from it. Why change, from Newsom to this guy? He's going to give us the same thing. Whereas with Caitlyn, you're going to get something different. Anyway, moving back to the discussion of the Dems, here are some of the names that are either gone or likely to be gone. Charlie Crist in Florida has announced that he's going to challenge Ron DeSantis for governor. Good luck with that, Charlie. Charlie was the governor when he was a Republican, and then he he switched over to the Dems and challenged Rick Scott for his. Was Charlie? Yeah, right. And then he challenged Rick Scott for the Senate seat as a Democrat, lost that. I think he got into that race for governor in 2020, lost, or 2020 I think it was, and lost that, or 2018. Whenever it was that DeSantis won, he lost there, so he's actually won a seat to the House of Representatives. But he's being redistricted. And Florida, apparently, thank goodness, is moving back really, to a sort of a solid red state. So Charlie Crist is out. Tim Ryan, who was ostensibly, nominally, a candidate for president out of Ohio in the 2020 Democrat primary, he's out. He's going to challenge for the open seat that Rob Portman's giving up in Ohio. Sherry Bustos, who was heading the Democrat Congressional Committee out of Illinois, she's out. She just had some victories too. Val Demings, who was one of the prosecutors of the impeachment of Donald Trump, looks like she's going to be out. Ann Kirkpatrick, I think, has already announced that from Arizona she's not going. Philemore Vela out of Texas is out. Henry Cuellar, Texas, is vulnerable, which incidentally was one of the reasons why he was, pushing back on Biden and telling Biden to knock it off on the border, because he's ruining his town. I think he sees the tea leaves, he's reading the tea leaves, and he sees that he's vulnerable in his congressional race. Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania has announced he is out. He will not be running. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull this up here. Are we live? Looking for the live feed on YouTube. There it is. I got it now. So let's can that. Just make sure we can see something. So you're seeing that Democrats are indicating that they're going to get crushed in 2022. Now, look, you don't count count your chickens before they're hatched, and there is a long way to go. We're 18 months away from the election, but these are professionals who see things that we frequently do not. I mean, I keep up on top of these things, but even I don't see the sort of polling that these guys have. And then I'm not in their districts, and I don't see how things are playing out in their district. And for them all to be scrambling just goes to show that they are feeling the heat in their respective races. And if some of them drop out to do other things because Biden's going to be making other appointments, Biden's going to have to consult Pelosi about some of these appointments, and you're probably not going to see too many more Democrats get appointed from the House to positions in the administration, just because Pelosi can't afford to lose any more people. I mean, she might do it if the seat is safe. She might allow Biden to poach some of her people if the seat's safe and they're going to have a quick turnaround in an election. But that aside, probably not going to see too many more folks in the House leaving their seats for jobs in the Biden administration moving forward. So, so far looking pretty good for a Republican turnaround. And this ties into what I was talking about earlier regarding the validity of the elections. And my thought is like, let's say the people who think that the elections weren't valid in 2020, they're saying, well, what's the point? These are the people who didn't turn out in Georgia for the special election, the Warnock-Ossoff election, which ended up being Warnock and Ossoff electoral victories in Georgia. I think that what they may be thinking is that the Democrats indulge themselves in some chicanery and some fooling around and cheating in 2020, but they know that they can't continue to do that, or else they're going to lose their they're going to lose the goose that lays the golden eggs, which is the system that they largely control in Washington. If people lose their faith in it, and so maybe they won't. They'll kind of tone it down and let happen what's going to happen, and maybe just fits around and fool around on the margins. But if there's a wave coming, they're probably not going to be able to stop it. That's theoretically what could be happening. And again, it's something that we'll monitor and bring to you here, the John Dennis Report, and continue to talk about. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to something that's, I know it's a subject that not a lot of people love, but I like to talk about because to me it is the big fear that how the U.S. is going to, could come down, where we are most vulnerable, and the most likely end of the story, should there be one, of the United States of America is our money system. We gave ourselves a privileged position in the world by declaring the U.S. dollar the reserve currency of the world, and it allowed us to export inflation and to play all kinds of games. But you can only cheat markets for so long. And when I mean markets, I mean natural markets. Can you pull that Wall Street Journal article up there, Mario, that says Yellen says? So Janet Yellen, who was the chairwoman of the Federal Reserve, is now the Treasury Secretary. Mario, pull that up if you don't mind. Thank you. Is saying something interesting here. Yellen says she isn't predicting higher interest rates, but she's indicating that they could move in that direction. And I think she's saying that likely they will at some point, because there's this concern about inflation. And it's an interesting little narrative going on here now. They're saying that this next round of stimulus is what's going to trigger inflation. It's the next round. It wasn't the last round. It wasn't the round before that when Trump was in office. It wasn't, all the money pumping that's been going on for a long time. Geez Louise, you could go back to, a long time, but certainly go back to Clinton. All the money pumping that's been going on. Go back to even Reagan for that matter. The last time we had an increase in interest rates to sop up the extra money supply was during the Carter administration. But anyway, they're saying this stimulus is the one that's really gonna create inflation. They're going to probably have to raise interest rates now. For those people who don't get it, I'm not going to get into a whole discourse on that. Just if you're really interested, send me a message somehow on one of the various social media followings that I have, and I'll give you some recommended reading stuff that I think will fascinate and interest you. But this article in the Wall Street Journal and Janet Yellen's actual comments are either a massive head fake or a massive headache, one or the other, because the country has become, and the world for that matter, has become addicted to very low interest rates. I mean, we have an interest rate on the 10-year Treasury, which is a base security for lots of other securities, including home mortgages, and it's right now, I think it's at about 1.56 or something like that, which means that for 10 years, if you buy that T-bill, that 10-year T-bill, you're going to get a 1.56% interest rate, which is absurdly low. I mean, it's ridiculously low. And she's saying, they may have to go up. But the political problem is that now that we're at $30 trillion in federal debt, is that when interest rates go up, that's more money that the federal government has to pay in interest payments, and that's something they can't afford. They're already running huge deficits. So where are they going to get the money from? Can't do that. But if you have massive inflation coming, because we are at the end, maybe at the end of the road for all this money creation, the only way to really deal with that is to raise interest rates. But when you raise interest rates, you sort of slow down economic activity, which impacts tax revenue, and then that impacts the viability of the federal government. So we're in a really funky spot here. This is the big story to watch right now. And look, I mean, if they would allow us to deal with the pain, it would be really bad. But we could probably make our way through it. It's just a big, as a friend of mine said, listen, I deal with haircuts all the time. We're gonna have to. These are people who are just gonna have to take a haircut. That's it. But when you're talking, that's one thing for a company to do it. That's one thing for, someone who's loaned money to take a haircut. It's a whole different ball game when you're asking countries to take haircuts, right? So we'll see. I'm not exactly sure where this is going to go. It feels very third worldy to me. It's sort of, I was watching, I got hooked on watching The Crown. I knew I was going to like it. It's great propaganda for the monarch in the UK. But there was a story about in the late 60s, the UK needed a bailout, and they came to LBJ. They had to figure a way out to get that bailout from the US. Felt like England was in a very third worldy kind of place, especially for a country that supposedly had a commonwealth, even if the empire had been eclipsed, it feels very third worldy that we're in the position that we're in right now with $30 trillion in federal debt. If rates go up, does the federal government go bankrupt? I don't know. If they go up 100 basis points, that's another $300 billion theoretically in debt service payments. It's a lot of money. I mean, that's only 100 basis points. Maybe what should interest rates be? Should they be, should the 10-year be at 5%? Holy Jesus! Think about that. You're talking about $1 trillion in extra debt service payments from the federal government. They don't have a $4 trillion budget as it is right now, and they can't pay those bills. So I don't know. It just feels very funky. On top of it, by the way, you have Joe Biden with his agenda, his big spend agenda, which is just sheer insanity. If the government could spend our way into a prosperity, let's give all of our money to the government. And then we could just sit home and let them make us rich. But this is preposterous. Of course, these are all payoffs for the politically connected. It's going to, when you combine this prospective increase in interest rates, and the requirement that it's going to have on some spending discipline in Washington, D.C., and then you have on top of it Pelosi's thinning out margins in the House, maybe we're not in that bad a position. Maybe we're going to see the kind of gridlock or maybe even compromise from the lunatics running the Biden administration and the lunatic leading the House. Forgive me, I haven't resorted much to the ad hominem on Pelosi, but the agenda that, let's just say this, the agenda that she and her compatriots in the House of the Democrat Party are putting forward are insane. It's lunacy what they're proposing, but they're going to have to scale that back, especially if you get higher interest rates, and combine that with, like as I said, combine that with the thinning majorities, and we may not be all that bad after all. So anyway, so there we go. Yeah, it's funny. Someone, Catherine, who's in here today, is saying that when she called Georgia, that the voters there said they didn't trust the voting machines and didn't trust the process, and that's the reason why, by the way, you saw Georgia make some changes to its voter laws, because they realized that they do polling and they realize that people lost faith in the process. And that's the worst thing. If you're a politician in a position of power, that's the last thing you want to hear, because it totally and completely delegitimizes you. And that is a canary in a coal mine of trouble ahead for the stability of a state. So that's one of the reasons why they had to move forward. That is the reason why they had to move forward. So anyway, sort of summarizing what we were saying about Yellen and rates rising, please watch that. That's all really important. Federal government is a racket that is, depends on retaining some level of legitimacy so that we'll continue to contribute to it. It is unnecessarily large. absurdly large for what they're supposed to do. There's no reason in the world that a quarter of our economy needs to go through the federal government. There's no reason for it, other than they can take it from us, and we won't put up too strong an objection. But if interest rates go up, it's going to create a whole new way of looking at the federal government. I think it could end up working out into our favor in the long run. Okay, that's it for today. Let's leave it at that. I'm so grateful that you joined us again on May 4th. We will be back on Thursday. In the meantime, punch really hard that subscribe button on YouTube. That's where we really want to kind of spend our time. And on Facebook too. Both of those are John Dennis Report, both on YouTube and on Facebook. Punch that subscribe button as if you're George Foreman knocking out Joe Frazier in Jamaica in 1973. Okay, so punch that, and please follow us there. And then also, if you'd like to, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, both at Real John Dennis. Instagram, we've been blowing up. Mario, have you noticed we've been blowing up on Instagram? Really big. Twitter gave me a massive haircut from Election Day to today. We still post there. It's not as fun as it used to be, but you can find us there at Real John Dennis there and on Instagram. Thanks again. Really appreciate having you, and we will see you live on Thursday. And if you subscribe on YouTube, we'll have some new content that's YouTube only between now and then. See you soon.